And I believe we are live. My name is Dennis Kim. I'm the concertmaster of your Pacific Symphony. And today's mixer is a little bit bittersweet. Usually, the Pacific Symphony during this time is busy in the pit, accompanying the incredible dancers and musicians and the whole staff of the ABT. And we're all nutcracking. And you see little kids, dressed up, and they're at the and it's full hall. So today we have the next best thing. We have the three maestros of ABT joining us. It is my great pleasure and honor to introduce David, Charles, and Ormsby. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you.
And like always, if you have any questions today, please put them in the chat or the Facebook Live, and we'll try to get to them. Let's just start by briefly introducing where you are right now, first of all, and maybe a little bit about your background and what you did before ABT, instrument that you studied when you were younger. Why don't we start with you, Ormsby?
Okay, so I am, you may tell from my accent, I'm from Australia originally. I started in ballet at the Australian Ballet. I was there as the company principal pianist for a number of years. I then moved into conducting at that company. The music director at that time was a man called John Lansbury, who those who have been around ballet long enough know that he was a great conductor of ballet and arranger of various scores that were often shown and heard in Costa Mesa. But anyway, he was the music director. I studied with him and eventually became a conductor there at the Australian Ballet. I then moved to London, was a conductor with what was then called the Sadler's Wells Royal Ballet, which now is the Birmingham Royal Ballet. I then moved over to Canada, to Toronto, and became the music director of the National Ballet of Canada. Was there for 16 years. Canadian, yes.
Canadian.
Canada, go Canada, yes. And then I took up the position of music director at American Ballet Theatre.
And you're a pianist by choice?
Yes, I am a pianist. That's what I studied mainly, yes. And percussion.
Oh, fantastic.
I used to play percussion in the Australian Youth Orchestra, or timpani I used to play in the Australian.
Wow, fantastic.
That was fun.
How about you, Charles?
No, I wasn't a timpanist, but I was a violinist, and just like you, Dennis, and came to New York, studied at Manhattan School of Music, and did a lot of freelancing as a violinist. Subbed at the City Ballet, at the Met, and never subbed at ABT. I played in the American Symphony, and just started conducting. What friend of mine, I was a concertmaster of an orchestra. A friend of mine said, "Look, I can't make the rehearsal next week. Could you do it?" And I said, "Well, okay." And it was really fun. I had a great time doing it. So I did a little study, and all of a sudden wound up conducting in Carnegie Hall my own orchestra of the American Chamber Orchestra back in the early '80s, and it was kind of like. Right into the fire, and but it seemed to go pretty well. And eventually, I got a job with this company that is unfortunately not in existence anymore. It was the John Curry Skating Company, and John Curry won the Olympics in 1976, and he wanted to make a company of skaters like a ballet company, and he did. For 18 months, and then he got sick and passed away, which was really unfortunate because it was probably one of the most beautiful things that I've ever seen. And it never really got a proper video showing, but we were at Albert Hall, we were at the Met, we were at the Kennedy Center.
Wow.
It was an amazing group, and that kind of set me off into dance. And I got a job with ABT. And I've been there about 33 years, something like that. Yeah, a long time. In the meantime, I've done other things. I was a music director of the Australian Ballet for about 6 or 7 years, and went to the Royal Ballet for a couple of years, and but never gave up my connection with ABT. Kind of hard to, because it's such a wonderful company and filled with really beautiful people, and so many interesting ideas and both musical and ballet wise, just conceptually artistic. It's really wonderful to be in some company that's so magical. So that's my history.
No, fascinating. And David, how about you?
Well, I hail from the great state of Rhode Island, and I went to Boston University, and I'm a pianist. So I've always been a pianist. I graduated from BU many years ago and moved to the West Coast for quote unquote lifestyle changes. And while I was out there, I was looking for a job. I had no job, and I had a roommate who was a dancer, and he said, well, you know, they have pianists that play for dance classes. Why don't you come and see if you can do it? So I watched a class and I thought, oh, that's something I can do. So I started accompanying dance classes while I lived in San Francisco. And then when I moved to New York, I sent resumes to a lot of different ballet companies. And the Dance Theatre of Harlem hired me to be their company pianist, which was a big job because it involved playing for all the rehearsals, classes, solo piano stuff, all the concertos and everything like that. And I was with them for a long time. And while I was working for that company, I started conducting because I knew the repertoire so well, and it seemed like the next logical step for me. So I worked for Dance Theatre of Harlem for many years. And then I moved on to ABT in 2000, actually. 2000, I joined ABT. And I have a hybrid job right now, which has 3 parts to it. Conductor, and I still function as a rehearsal pianist, sometimes, not all the time. And I am the administrator for the music department. Wow. So, yeah, so I have all 3 jobs, none of which are happening right now, but yes, I have 3 jobs. Oh, and also, yeah. I forgot to say, I'm also the music director of the Paul Taylor Dance Company right now. So, yeah.
No, initially when I talked to the Pacific Symphony staff and came up with the idea of asking these 2 gentlemen, I said, oh man, well, I'll ask one of them and see if they're busy. And I reached out to all 3 of them. They're all free. They all have nothing to do, and they're all thrilled to join us. So we're very lucky. I mean, it's sad that we're not in the pit and sweating and working our butts off. But I mean, this is, I guess, the next best thing to speak to you guys.
It's not just us. I mean, all you musicians too are going through a tough time. You're not working, not playing either. So it's not just us.
Sure.
We understand.
No, I mean, a bunch of musicians reached out to me this week and they said, "Oh, you're talking to those guys. Please send them our love, and we miss them, and we can't wait to be back in the pit and doing stuff with them, because really the relationship with Pacific Symphony and ABT is something very special." I'm kind of new here. This is only my 2nd year, but I've had a chance to play in ballets in other parts of the world, no names, of course. It's not the best. It's not the best musical standards. This doesn't work, that doesn't work. It's always something is one level lower, and that is certainly not the case here in Orange County with ABT and Pacific Symphony. I feel like we play our best. I feel like the collaboration, there's a mutual respect, and it's fantastic when you have people before Nutcracker excited instead of like, oh my gosh, we have 14 Nutcrackers left. So that was very special for me.
Well, I think the other thing about, just if I may, just
sure.
Here, ABT has had this very long relationship with the Segerstrom Theatre and the Pacific Symphony, but of course it has also been, been well known as a venue for a lot of different dance companies. I mean, dance has been a huge part of Costa Mesa, a part of that of your theater and your organization. And the first time I conducted the Pacific Symphony was back in the 80s with the Australian Ballet. We came here, I think, and did, if I remember, I may be getting my dates a little wrong, but it was in the 80s, and it was Merry Widow, which is, I don't know whether when the last time we might have done that, whether ABT has ever done that at the.
I don't remember.
The Australian Ballet did, and it's part of ABT's repertoire as well. And that is an arrangement of course, the Leha music of John Lanchby. But anyway, I just wanted to point out that I think ballet has been a hugely important part of the presentations at Eckstrom Theatre. Not just us, not just American Ballet Theatre. I think that's to be lauded, you know.
Right, absolutely. I had the honor to play at the funeral of Bill Gillespie, I know, who was a huge lover of ABT and dance and all things musical in this area. I know that you've all met him, and I didn't know him personally, but you know, he really loved the ABT, and he actually started a school here, and named after him, I believe. And if you're looking down, please, we thank you, all of us, for your generous support, and we will continue to do our best to honor your generosity and your support. A lot of.
I'm sorry.
No, please.
Very generous donor to ABT for many, many years, and was particularly, I think, attached to the idea of education and the young dancers and the school, of course, which is named after him. But a very modest man, but extremely beloved amongst all the ABT community.
And he's in really good company too, because the ABT Ballet School in New York is the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis School. So we call it the JKO School. And the ties with the Gillespie School are very they're very tight. I have the pleasure of teaching music classes to the kids at the JKO School in New York, and I've had several. Since we're on Zoom now, I've had several classes with where the Gillespie kids were also attached to it, and you know, it's a wonderful thing. That sort of education of opening the young minds, both physically and intellectually and artistically, it's a great thing. So he's in fantastic company.
I get a lot of my colleagues have also asked me, but how does a conductor specialize in ballet conducting? I think that all three of you gentlemen could conduct a Mahler symphony and a Beethoven symphony. Why did you choose this route? How about you, David?
Well, for me, as I was talking about before, I grew into it from my role as a pianist for the first company that I worked for. Actually, this is my history is that over a course of 2 or 3 years with Dance Theatre of Harlem, I learned most of their repertory. And then the director of the company asked me if I wanted to conduct. And I said, well, I've never conducted, you know. And so he said, well, why don't you, study with a private teacher or something and prepare a score, and we'll let you conduct. And so I already loved dance. So when I started conducting, I discovered that I liked it and that I had an aptitude for it. And because it was already in the field that I was in, I just seemed to. I've always had a special relationship with dance, so I thought it just seemed like my niche, and that's how I got into it.
Right.
Not everybody likes it. Not every conductor likes to do it.
Right.
My colleagues will tell you, but I mean, I'm not saying they don't. They do, but yeah, that's my story.
So Charles, you've conducted other ensembles. What is your love of ballet conducting, and do you do other conducting now?
Yeah, I'm pretty well focused on ballet right now, and one of the main reasons, I'm sorry guys, it's that I get a check, they pay me, and it's conducting is a extremely limited occupation, and to have a forte, to have a niche is great. And I'm strangely, when I took the job with ABT, I figured, okay, 3 years max, and then I'll be off and I'll be doing other things. I'll just kind of get to know what it's like. And after those 3 years, I kind of looked back and said, now let's see, I've done Rite of Spring, Petrushka. I've been doing, like 12 shows of Romeo and Juliet every year. I'm doing Cinderella next year. It's like, well, wait a minute, hold on a second. This is great. This music is right at the top of the repertoire. I'm not going anywhere. There's no reason to go anyplace. Plus, I get to work with stagehands, lighting technicians, makeup artists, dancers, musicians. I get the best of both worlds. I get to work with this theater group, and that is just absolutely magical, totally magical.
Ormsby.
Yeah, I almost might not have been here at all having this lovely conversation with you because the way I had always wanted to do conducting, but I was focused, at school and at my conservatorium on the piano, and I had this feeling that I wanted to be a concert pianist. I thought I could be a concert pianist at one point. But I did my 4 years at conservatorium, and then I just felt like I wanted a job, and it just so happened that a friend of mine was the principal pianist of the Australian Ballet, and he said, well, look, this job is going. We actually have chosen someone, but they're not sure whether they want to do the job. Why don't you audition for Maestro Lansbury, and you never know. So I auditioned for him, and he immediately gave me the job, and the other guy came back and said, actually, I think I do want the job. And I said, I'm sorry, it's too late.
Oops.
I mean, these are things that happen perhaps to all of us at some point, these sort of crazy bits of fate or serendipity or whatever it is. And it's happened to me a few times. But anyway, that's how I got started with ballet. And I never intended, I thought, well, I'll do a year, maybe I'll do 2 years, and then I'll go back to becoming a great virtuoso pianist. Fortunately, I didn't do that because I realized very soon, later on that I wouldn't have suited me. But I certainly didn't think that I would stay too long at the Australian Ballet. But I guess I showed some aptitude for accompanying at, I used to play class like David did, and rehearsals, and really, it was me who went to Lansbury and said, I'd like to conduct, and he very, very kindly said, okay, well, we'll give you a chance. And before I didn't do anything for a while. There was another conductor there, and I had lessons, and I had a lot of things to do before they put me up in front of the orchestra. But that's how that started. And I loved it. Right from when I was a pianist, I loved working with dancers. They're amazing, but their work, I guess you can say this about a lot of professions, but it's a tough job. They don't get paid. They get paid very little, really, compared to their talents and to their abilities and the physical nature of what they do. They have to be so dedicated to do what they do, because unless you have the luck of becoming a principal and maybe having more of a career, you're not going to make any money out of being a dancer. So I totally, completely admire their incredible fortitude in what they do. And so anyway, I felt that's really how it all came to pass, and I loved it, and I started conducting, and it just went from there, I guess.
Oh, it's an amazing, I have a great seat, obviously, in the pit, and I get a chance to see everything. And these people, these artists who are in such great shape, but you see them after, and they're sweating and they're breathing hard, and just the pure energy that's being spent is so amazing to watch. And for me, it really, the Nutcracker here with ABT and Pacific Symphony is something that's very special. We have a few questions, and this is for any one of you. Please jump in. How are leading roles assigned in ballet? Is it thanks to a good, assertive agent? An artistic decision made by the directors? I ask, since there are many great ones like Misty Copeland and others, how do you decide who gets this one and who gets that one?
It's totally up to the conductors. No, I'm just.
Please answer that too, but I have another question. So as many of you know, certain leading dancers work with certain conductors. How does that get divided up?
Ormsby does it.
Oh, is that right?
I might answer the second one. Someone else can answer the first question, maybe, as to who decides on the casting.
So it's the artistic director of the company, Kevin McKenzie, who, with the help of his associates, decides what the casting is for the ballets. Also, if there's a guest choreographer coming in to do a piece, that choreographer does have requests for certain dancers, but then he still has to go through the artistic director, and together they form make a decision as to what the casting will be. That's how it's done. Yeah,
but it's important to also to note that it's not like it appears in the movie or TV show about TV shows about ballet or ballet schools. That yes, it is the artistic director, but the artistic director might have 12 or 15 principals, and we have 7 full lengths and 2 rep programs and a gala at the Met. So it's not going to be just one person who's going to do all that. It's going to be spread amongst all of these people, and it's who has a guest engagement and can't make that week. You know, it's actually kind of a puzzle. It's not necessarily who's best for the role, because they're all fantastic. So in some cases it might be who's best for the role, but that's just the first show. Then the second show, it's going to be somebody else, and the third show, it's going to be somebody else. So it's kind of like a puzzle.
Yeah, and of course, what's to be remembered is that, you know, it's true, the artistic director makes the very important casting decisions. But of course, one ballet may have 40 or 50 people at some point in the stage. There has to be casting for the soloist roles, there's casting for the corps de ballet. You know, there's not just one cast of corps de ballet. So the Kevin McKenzie, our artistic director, relies a lot on the ballet staff to do a lot of that casting. He just couldn't possibly necessarily, he has to approve it in the end, but I think a lot of the casting of the smaller roles gets done by the ballet. Well, what do we, I have to say, they're not ballet masters and mistresses anymore.
Repertoire directors.
Yeah, directors of repertoires.
Have new names for our ballet staff. But so, and in terms of the dividing up the conducting, who conducts for who? I mean, we all have our favorite dancers. A lot of the time, those dancers, we all love the same dancer. I hope that they can push back on this, but I think, even though, because I'm music director, I guess I would decide how it works out over, particularly in New York, where we have an 8-week season at the Met, 8 shows a week. There's a bit of a puzzle to put together, but I think I try and even it out as much as possible with various dancers. We all love to conduct everyone. I don't think we necessarily like to stick with just one dancer. We love them all, and in varying degrees, but we do. It's always interesting to have different casts. I mean, in Swan Lake, for instance, we might do 8 shows in 1 week. There might be 8 casts. So we'll have to actually at least have 2, if not 3 casts. And that's enough, actually, if we're for a week, you know. So mix and match.
Because each cast has a different aura and a different set of movements and a different tempo and a different feel about them. And so we have to go to the rehearsals and understand that so we can bring it off in the performance. That's what was so yeah, if there are 8 casts of Swan Lake and it's 2, 2, and 3, well, that person who has 3 has got a lot of work because they have to go to the 3 different sets of rehearsals and understand all that and be able to bring it about. Yeah, it's definitely tricky.
As a musician, I'm sure many of you know, but when we do the Nutcracker here, we have 14, 15 shows, but these 3 maestros, they don't all, not one person does all of them. So to hear the different sounds coming out of the orchestra under different conductors is really fascinating. And I don't know how many of you guys can have a chance to hear 3 different performances with 3 different conductors, but not only tempo, but just the sound that comes out of the orchestra is completely different. And it's amazing how the timing works, and somehow the dancers can do all this with a different conductor and a different orchestra. It's amazing to me, anyways. I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask: do you visualize dancers' movements while conducting? Have any specific dancers influenced the way you conduct?
Well, sorry, I'll just
Go ahead.
The one thing that always comes to mind is that different dancers have different musicality at times, and it's not necessarily that one is wrong or one is right. It's just a different way of interpreting the music. So I think that before you actually go into the pit, or if something that's coming up that is important for you to be aware of what they're doing, you will be treating it a little differently sometimes depending on who's dancing, because you just know that someone wants to either be a little bit ahead of the music, that's fine, or maybe they'll be a little bit just sitting on the back of the beat, or those sort of things. You have to be really clear in your mind before you actually get in the pit. You have to know your dancers, and you have to be in the studio and get to understand. And I think a lot of people who conduct casually for the ballet find this very difficult, actually. It's something that you learn over time.
It's interesting because I know a lot of conductors who conduct symphony orchestras and then they'll do some opera, but very few conductors who are conducting symphonies conduct ballet. So this is a very special thing, even more different than opera. I have a question. Do the dancers dance to your command, or conducting, I'm assuming, or do you follow the dancers? David?
People always ask that question. That's the most favorite question of anybody. Okay, here's the thing. So building upon what Ormsby said, we tried to figure out all these problems of these challenges of making the dance fit with the music in rehearsal. 90% of it gets done in rehearsal. And then you go into the performance and you go ahead and do what you planned in rehearsal, but you're open to there being changes on stage as you go along. I would say I think my colleagues would say the same thing. The only times that we absolutely have to look at the stage are certain places that need coordination, like beginnings and endings of variations. In the middle, sometimes there's a part where you have to follow or something like that. So we're always aware, but just for me, I wouldn't say that I'm following the dancer necessarily, but you're just sort of letting the cues, letting that sort of the milieu enter you into you or something, and then just it is a joint venture there. So that's what I wouldn't say following. I wouldn't say, and we're certainly not commanding them to dance either. Like, you dance, but
and it's not that different than accompanying a soloist, a piano soloist. I mean, there's that famous Glenn Gould, Leonard Bernstein video where Bernstein he has to accompany him, and it's extremely difficult because Glenn had his own way, and so it's kind of like being a part of this team. And as David said, it's done in rehearsal. 90% at least is done in rehearsal.
And I think, it's not as if we were not talking about ballet, if we were just talking about conducting, say you were talking to musicians, and one of the questions you might ask the musicians: do you actually follow the conductor? Do you actually watch? It doesn't look like anyone is watching the conductor, right?
So Dennis, can I ask you a question?
so I think it's all a lot of bag of tricks going on here, And I think with dancers, we're not trying to follow, but we're not trying to force them into something generally either. So hopefully it's a amalgam of things that you work out in the studio. That's the main thing. Be in the studio, and I think, again, just not naming any names, but I think, as I say, conductors who come casually to ballet don't think they have to be in the studio. Don't think they just come in, say, all right, here's a dress rehearsal or maybe a rehearsal before. But I know myself, and I know that because I know what my fellow conductors do, we go into the studio as early as possible, actually, earlier rather than later, because then the dancers know, even if they're not, even if you want to try and say, well, maybe you could do that this way, or they know that what they're going to get. You know, this is it's consistency is what they want also. So even if it's not quite as fast or as slow as they want, as long as they know that's what you do in the studio is what they're going to get on the stage. At least that's what we're trying to do anyway.
Mm-hmm. And Dennis, you asked if there were any dancers that influenced us, and I have the very special position of having married a ballerina. So I met my wife in Australia. She was a principal dancer with the Australian Ballet, and her name was Miranda Coney. She was a fantastic dancer. And I have this beautiful memory of spending 3 hours in her living room. And we just talked through the 3 minutes of the mad scene in Giselle. We talked about every note and every gesture. For 3 hours, we went through everything. And
that's all you did, was that?
just 3 hours. No, I'm not kidding. And it was, you know, at the end of it, we came to this kind of wonderful understanding of what was going on. And rather than the music just, you know, kind of plowing on through and the dancer having to do it, or the, you know, trying to wait for the dancer or rush the dancer from the podium, it was a kind of a mutual understanding of what was going on. And that was remarkable, and it's something that's always stuck with me. And to be kind of connected that way. And we had performances too, where it happened on stage, and you know what we had talked about actually happened on stage, and that was fulfilling for me.
I think you should,
Charles,
I think you should tell the story about how you proposed to Miranda.
Please.
Well, it was the Merry Widow again, and we were in Perth, Australia, which is Miranda's hometown. And that year we were doing, let's see, Giselle and Swan and Merry Widow. And Giselle, well, that's not too good. She's, you know, she dies. She dies at the end. That doesn't really work. And in Swan, that doesn't really work. You know, they go into the lake, and so it was going to be Merry Widow. So we get to Perth, and I asked the director of the company at the time, it was Ross Stratton, if he would mind if I did this on stage after the show, and he thought it was a great idea. So I said, the only one thing, we just can't tell anybody, not press, not the stage manager, nobody. All we can do is say, we just need a wireless mic. Charles is going to put on a wireless mic after the show. And so the stage manager agreed. She didn't know what was going on until right before Act 3, when I brought her 24 red roses. I said, could you just hang on to these? She figured out what was going on. So, and Miranda, of course, was the widow. And I thought, you know, looking back, it was really daring, because, you know, things could have fallen apart. You know, there could have been a cast change. It could have been a really terrible performance. You know, who knows? So anyway, it was a great show. And as I was walking out of the pit, I said to the musicians, you might just want to hang around and watch what happens. And went up on stage and got the wireless mic on. We took our bows, and I went off stage, and they took a page bow, and then we had a full company bow again. And the stage manager got on the voice of God and said, ladies and gentlemen, could we have your attention? Everybody got really quiet, and I came walking out. I introduced myself. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Charles Barker. I'm the music director of the Australian Ballet. And I have a question for tonight's widow. And I turned around, got down on one knee, offered a ring, and said, Miranda Coney, will you be my wife? And there was this silence in the hall for like a second. And it was the most magnificent silence I can remember. And then all of a sudden, kaboom, it exploded. And it was really thrilling. And she did say yes, strangely. She never said yes that night.
Oh,
she did the next day, but not that night. So.
That's so cool.
We have one question. Would it be helpful if the conductor was a dancer? Do you know any ballet conductors who used to be dancers?
That one in,
Maybe you're going to say the same thing as me, David. You say what you do.
in Toronto. They just hired somebody in Toronto to be, that's what I was going to say, in Toronto to be a conductor for the National Ballet of Canada. I don't know, do you know her name, Ormsby? She used to be a principal dancer in Europe, somewhere. I'm sorry, I can't remember the company. But she was a principal dancer, and she was just hired as an assistant, sort of, in Toronto. That's the only one I know.
But well, I remember watching. There was been at least one, if not several, conductors in Russia at the Bolshoi. I know of one I saw conduct who I learned had been a dancer and had transitioned to conducting for the Bolshoi.
Mm-hmm. Also some choreographers. Balanchine sometimes conducted, not for shows, and also Rudolf Nureyev did a performance of Romeo and Juliet with ABT at the Met, and it was astonishing. I wouldn't say that he was necessarily the best conductor for the show, but it was astonishing that he actually got through it.
No, I think a lot of composers also try to conduct their music, and it's not always the best conducting, but they know what they want. So that part is special. But I heard Strauss conducted, and even some more modern composers.
John Adams.
John Adams.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as a treat, we have a small short clip of the Nutcracker, of our beloved Nutcracker. So if Alexi can put it up on the screen. Please forgive us if it's a little choppy, but if this doesn't go well, please go to their website, and a lot of this stuff is on YouTube, and enjoy. But this is a short clip of the Nutcracker. Oh, it's incredible. I mean, it brings goosebumps. And you see on Facebook feeds all over, people are saying, this is the first time in 40 years I didn't do the Nutcracker this Christmas, and it is sad, but I'm hoping that we'll all be back in the pit and on stage soon. Please, David.
Just to say, that was, in case you missed the credits, that was Isabella Boylston and James Whiteside, who are two of our wonderful principals doing that part of deux. I was just getting goosebumps because I was thinking that music, it's the greatest music. It is. We are so lucky in the ballet world to have these three scores of Tchaikovsky. They're just so magnificent, and that part of deux is one of the greatest pieces of music of all time, as far as I'm concerned. And it's just the expressiveness and how it just tells its own story. It's an amazing piece of music.
Yeah.
Well, also the simplicity of it. It's just a G major scale, a descending G major scale. That's it. And he does so much with this very simple idea. And yeah, it shows such remarkable genius. I agree with Ormsby totally.
Yeah.
I don't think all of our listeners know, but the Nutcracker was not such a success when it was first written.
Not really, no. I think that it wasn't, well, it certainly wasn't the sort of thing it is today, which is like a cash cow for all the ballet companies. It wasn't anything like that. I think the thing is, though, that by the time Tchaikovsky got to the Nutcracker, that was his third big ballet. So he sort of, Swan Lake was a very difficult process. Sleeping Beauty was better because he was able to work directly with Petipa, who was the choreographer. And then by the time he got to Nutcracker, they'd worked out all the kinks. And I think it was still, a pretty, as a composition, I think Nutcracker is almost faultless in terms of its structure and the whole ballet, So it wasn't like I say, it wasn't a huge hit, but it also was not a failure at all.
Really, Swan Lake that was not really successful. It had apparently, so they say, terrible choreography and really didn't. And this type of music for ballet was so unheard of. This whole
symphonic music, right? Yeah, Tchaikovsky actually wanted to pull out of the Nutcracker project. And but they talked him back into it, and it was in conjunction with Iolanta, which is an opera. So it was one evening. It started with 2 hours of the Nutcracker, and then it went to this 2-act opera about a blind girl. And our theater going today is totally different than it was at the Mariinsky Theater in the 1890s. So, Tchaikovsky he didn't like the idea of all of the that it was kind of simple, that he wanted, I think, something a little bit more demanding and intellectually challenging. And what he did, I think, was to put all of that intellectual challenge into the music itself. And so Act One, it's a perfect piece of music. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And it slides from one piece to the next in the most exceptional way of any score that I've ever conducted.
Well, you think of that. This is one of his last works. Very late in his career. Tchaikovsky was at the height of his powers when he died, really. And unlike, there are a lot of conductors who weren't, perhaps, went on, and perhaps some of their later works aren't so great, but Tchaikovsky's just got better and better, and he was totally at the height of his power when he wrote.
And he was also traveling and trying to make money, because Andrew Carnegie had just invited him to New York to open Carnegie Hall, and he just was working on the Nutcracker at the time. And his sister had died, and there's a lot of major minor duality that happens in the Nutcracker. The pieces are not necessarily sugary. They have an edge to them, and a kind of an eyebrow raised. And many musicologists believe that he was kind of expressing his own emotion at the loss of his sister. So for instance, in the pas de deux, it begins with a descending G major scale, but then 4 bars later, it's a descending E minor scale, which is of course the relative minor of G major. And so it's this kind of duality that he goes back and forth with. And but for us to listen to and also to analyze and to work with, what a blessing it is.
When I was in Hong Kong, we actually had a chance to perform this without the ballet, and we just put on the second half of a concert, just little snippets. It was amazing, and people loved it. Yeah, like you said, it's just incredible music. There's so much feedback just from that little clip. We have one more little clip because of popular demand, and this is something that you'll all recognize, of course. It's amazing.
I don't know whether we should. I can let you in on a little secret about this. You know,
Sure.
when this was when of course it was decided we couldn't come out to Costa Mesa to do our Nutcracker season. They were thinking about what can they do to at least acknowledge that it's Nutcracker time and that ABT does production, and we're all missing it. So they decided to film the pas de deux. And they actually found a large room, I think a ballroom, I'm not sure whether you'd call that, in what's called the Highline Hotel in New York City. And they found all this, of course, that's not the setting that if people have seen our production at the Segerstrom, that of course is not the set. They just put a whole lot of, found all these things that were very Christmassy and put them all together. But there were limitations also in terms of what they could dance and what they couldn't. And the Sugar Plum Fairy, this is the choreography of Alexei Ratmansky, our artist in residence and principal choreographer for ABT. But his solo for the Sugar Plum Fairy, that was not his choreography because it's so difficult. And there's a very, very difficult double circle for the ballerina, which was just not possible in that environment that they were filming. So they actually, Alexei, they decided to do what is actually the petit pas choreography, at least what they believed to be the petit pas choreography, who was the original choreographer of the Nutcracker. So that solo that you saw is not Ratmansky, but actually petit pas, as much as we know, when these things are handed down and written down, but that was actually petit pas. the solo. Pas de deux was Ratmansky, the Adagio.
But Dennis, could I ask a question of all of those people who are watching?
Sure.
Could you type into the chat that magical instrument that plays the sugar plum variation?
The violin.
And why and while you're typing that into the chat, I'll tell you that while Tchaikovsky was on his way to New York, he stopped in Paris, and he stopped at the shop of Auguste Mustel, which actually still exists in Paris today. Mustel was from a family of keyboard instrument builders, and Mustel had just invented this keyboard instrument. Tchaikovsky saw it, and he'd had a little bit of a demonstration on it, and he went back to his hotel room and he wrote his publisher and said, buy 2 of these, ship them to St. Petersburg, and keep them in a crate, and don't let Rimsky-Korsakov or Glazunov see it.
He did say that.
Because yes, he did. Because they'd steal it. And then he went to New York. He had great success with opening Carnegie Hall, and he came back out, and all the time, I'm sure he was thinking about what to compose. And I was thinking about the overture of the Nutcracker, which is it's only violins and violas and a couple of wind instruments, and the harmony is so tight. And I just wonder if he had this instrument in mind while he was writing the overture, because there's no basses, there's no big chords, it's all very, very tight. And I don't know if anyone has put it in the chat, but we
got a correct answer now.
Right away.
Yeah,
excellent. It's called the celeste.
Right.
We use the Italian pronunciation, but it was this La Celestiale, the heavenly instrument, and it is an instrument that is unlike a piano. The pianos strike the strings from beneath. The celeste hits the metal bars from above, and the only detriment is that it's not particularly loud. So the Tchaikovsky scored it for just piano pizzicato strings and celeste, and then the occasional bass clarinet. So it's a really fun story that don't let Glazunov or Rimsky see this.
Charles, are you getting ready for musical Jeopardy? My God.
Oh yeah. He's
Wow.
a font of information.
Incredible.
Yes.
We had a trivia quiz for our Christmas party a few days ago. ABT.
I wonder who won.
Pardon?
I wonder who
Charles
won.
came very close. He came very close.
I came in second. Our
Yeah, that's
archivist,
right.
the ABT archivist came in first, and I came in
goodness.
second. So.
Which we thought was a little bit odd.
Yeah.
So I ask all our guests this, and it's a little bit me patting myself on the back, but for each of you, what makes the Pacific Symphony special? And I can imagine that ABT can do the Nutcracker or any production anywhere in the world. Why the Pacific Symphony, and why out here in Orange County?
Oh, well, I mean, Ormsby was sort of talking about this before. Orange County, the Pacific Symphony is one of 2 organizations in the US where I consider to be like the foundation of touring companies in the US. One is Pacific Symphony in Orange County. The other is the Kennedy Center in Washington. And those are the bookends of any touring season for any major company. They present all the companies. And so because of that, and because both orchestras are so good, and because their collective knowledge of the repertoire extends back to, 40 years or how many years, we can go into places like this and do any piece with, basically the minimum amount of rehearsal time that is required, and get good performances because of the standard of the orchestra and because of their familiarity with all our repertoire. And that's why companies, especially ABT, always love to go to Orange County. And also, as a bonus, the orchestra is so nice, so you got 2 things going on there. And they have a great concertmaster.
More.
I think if I could just kind of piggyback on David, the artistic level, the musical level of the orchestra in general is incredibly high. You guys are fantastic. You're a great orchestra, and for us, it is an honor and a challenge to stand on the podium with you all. You know, you demand from us, and I think we enjoy that repartee, and also it's not necessarily all work. You guys are also fun. We laugh in rehearsals. We have a good time. And in performances too, things happen and we wink and we, you know, there's that kind of the communication that only musicians at that caliber can have. And it is, yeah, and they do have a great concertmaster.
all those things. I'm not going to say that in my little. I think all those things are so true. I just want to say that you know, I know that it's the Pacific Symphony Orchestra. Your first job is as a symphony orchestra. You are a symphony orchestra, but you also play for the opera and you play for the ballet. But it seems to me that you are that the orchestra always strikes me as being so tuned in to what we need in as far as dance is concerned. So there's, apart from, you know, we never have enough, you know, always rehearsal time is very tight. So the orchestra is always well prepared. That is really important. We don't have to teach anyone how to, you know, we don't have to do things just from that point of view of going through things just so that people learn things. The orchestra is so well prepared and understands that they have to be attuned to what the conductor is doing all the time. You know, this wonderful sort of thing. Of course, they've got their music, but they're always got this peripheral vision. You always feel like the orchestra is there, wherever you want to take the orchestra.
No, it's I was surprised when
we want to take them into very odd areas sometimes. You know, from sometimes the tempos, every so often that there's a really odd tempos that we ask for, tempi we ask for, but you go there and you go there with delight. It always seems to me that's really what it's about.
No, for me, I was shocked because we had a rehearsal, and I remember the first year was with you, Ormsby, and it was fantastic. And then we started doing the concerts, and then two other guys came up, and I was like, wait, but we haven't rehearsed with these guys. And it was amazing that because your tempos are not all the same and your gestures are not all the same. Some are bigger, smaller, and the flexibility with my colleagues. And for me, I think it's just a mutual respect and love of each other's companies. And I don't know what the future holds with COVID and all, but we all are desperate for you to come back. We hope that you do more projects here. I know that everyone loves the ABT. Not only everyone in the Pacific Symphony, but everyone in Orange County. And we hope you stay safe. We hope that we can make music again soon. And thank you so much for taking time during this holiday season and sharing your vast knowledge and your experience. And we hope to see you here very soon.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Thank you very much.
Very soon. We love being there.
Mm-hmm.
Bye-bye.
Thanks very much. Bye,
Happy
guys.
holidays.
Happy holidays.